false memories are definitely a thing.
So a lot of you out there have sent me these contradictory clips from our old pal Kyle Kulinski talking about the death of his father. The following clip was posted to YouTube on November 11th, 2014.
One of the reasons my father died young is because of a chiropractor. Okay, you're probably thinking, whoa, what the f***, are you serious? So my father, he smoked heavily his whole life. He died at the age of 56, okay, from lung cancer. And the cancer metastasized all over the place. Now, he's one of those guys who has this belief system that I totally disagree with. I always have. The idea that you never go to a doctor. Okay, you don't trust doctors, you never go to doctors, yada, yada. Well, that was problem number one. Problem number two is when he started having some back pain, he didn't go to a doctor. He knew a chiropractor from the place where he would golf all the time.
The next clip was posted on March 19th, 2020.
My dad is dead because we don't have Medicare for all. He very well could be alive today if we had Medicare for all. He didn't have insurance. He avoided going to the doctor for his back pain. He went to a freaking chiropractor instead to save money. It was a tumor. By the time he went to the emergency room, it was too late. He died very soon thereafter. So Joe Biden is saying, okay, under my administration, I would pursue policies that still have your dad die, Kyle.
Now, before I get into this, I should say on the substance of the matter, the whole, if you don't accept my policy agenda, you're okay with people like my dad dying, is a stupid, disingenuous argument. There's not a whole lot else to say besides that. Now, as far as the evolving story goes, there are a couple of possibilities. Obviously, he may have changed the story to better suit his political agenda. That's certainly what a lot of his critics seem to think. Though, I'm pretty sure he was for single-payer healthcare back in 2014, so I'm not sure why he didn't go with the second story in the first place if he's just being politically expedient. There is actually a much more charitable interpretation of this whole thing. I'm not saying this is necessarily the case, I'm just saying that it's possible. There is a cognitive phenomenon known as confabulation. According to Wikipedia, confabulation is a memory error defined as the production of fabricated, distorted, or misinterpreted memories about oneself or the world. People who confabulate present incorrect memories ranging from subtle alterations to bizarre fabrications, and are generally very confident about their recollections, despite contradictory evidence. Confabulation is entirely universal. Everyone does it. Here's a clip from a channel called Oregon Behavior Consultation. They explain confabulation far better than I ever could.
Confabulation happens when your brain fills in the blank as you're remembering something. Like I said, all of our brains do this filling in without us even knowing it. This is because our memories are imperfect, and so the brain lends us a hand by confabulating missing details. We don't know when we're confabulating because it feels as if we're accessing a normal, intact memory. Most of us experience memories as if a film is playing in our head. Each time we remember it, it feels as if it's the same film that we've watched many times before. We often feel as if we're there in the memory, reliving the moment, and so it makes sense that most of us trust our memory. But the truth is, neuroscience research shows that each time we remember something, our brains distort it. And if there's no memory in place, our brains will often confabulate rather than letting us worry about missing details.
There's actually an episode of South Park about this. In the season 13 episode titled Fish Sticks, Jimmy comes up with a joke about fish sticks while Cartman was merely there. Yet through a series of recollections, Cartman sees himself as more and more responsible for the joke. I've actually done similar things myself. I've written entire YouTube videos based upon my memory of what someone said, only to go back to pull the clip and see that I misremembered what that person was actually saying. Entire videos, and the hours of my life spent working on them, have been lost to confabulation. Again, I don't know if that's what happened to Kyle here. I'm just saying it's possible. It's also possible he's a liar. I feel like a sort of collective version of this happens a lot here in the YouTube politics sphere. In fact, I've noticed a sort of pattern. Someone will engage in speculation. Then over time, that speculation will just be accepted as fact, irrespective of whether or not confirmatory evidence has emerged. Then later, this new fabricated fact will be used as a premise in future arguments and future speculation. In other words, nonsense snowballs into more nonsense. It's like a game of telephone. The truth slowly gets distorted over time. I actually saw this happen in real time during the 2020 Democratic primary. Remember when Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar dropped out the day before Super Tuesday and endorsed Joe Biden? There was some speculation that Obama was behind the scenes pulling the strings. From what I saw, this speculation started on the Young Turks during their Super Tuesday election coverage by their correspondent Emma Vigeland.
Jake has been teasing us about this great theory that you have, so I want to hear about that. What is that theory? my theory, I mean, it's backed up by reporting that Buttigieg and Obama spoke over the weekend. Then Buttigieg dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. Then Amy Klobuchar, what do you know? She drops out. And then Beto O'Rourke, the original Obama impersonator until Pete Buttigieg came along. Then he goes and endorses Joe Biden. So I think there's a coordinated effort on behalf of the Democratic establishment to say we got to coalesce behind this guy. I think that's clear. Everyone knows that. But who has the power to spurn that kind of organizing effort? Who has the power to get people to these people with huge egos? I mean, Pete Buttigieg, the mayor, the 37-year-old mayor running for president. How do you get that kind of guy to drop out and endorse someone? It's got to be from the top. And I think Obama made calls to more than Pete Buttigieg. That's just my hunch.
So I love that theory by Emma. I saw it first from your Twitter account, Emma, honestly. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's obviously true. Okay, nobody else has the power to call Beto O'Rourke and have him ruin his career in Texas by backing Biden on a bridge to nowhere other than Obama.
Despite this never being confirmed by an authoritative source, it was taken on as factual information by most of the progressive YouTube commentariat.
So does anyone remember Joe Biden? I think that's his name, Joe Biden. He was the Democratic Party's nominee in 2020. He was the centrist clown that Obama pushed through, got everyone to drop out and back him when he won one state.
Sometime later, the people who watched them, who are not necessarily explicitly political channels themselves, then engaged in their own speculation based on the supposed truth of this claim.
The whole thing of the establishment all coalescing, and that was Barack Obama himself was responsible for that, by the way. He called...
No, of course he was. Because newsflash, Barack Obama was never your friend. Barack Obama was always part of the establishment that has its boot at your throat. And he always will be.
Unfortunately for them, there's no evidence this is true. This is what happens when you get your news from YouTube. To the substance of the claim, while an Obama intervention certainly seems plausible, there's actually no evidence that things went down that way. Obama did speak with Buttigieg the day he dropped out. However, the phone call happened after Buttigieg decided to end his campaign. Also, according to the source that leaked this information to the press, Obama never explicitly told him to endorse Biden. To quote the New York Times article that originally reported this, Mr. Obama did not specifically encourage Mr. Buttigieg to endorse Mr. Biden, said the official, who insisted on anonymity to discuss private conversations. But Mr. Obama did note that Mr. Buttigieg had considerable leverage at the moment and should think about how best to use it. There's also zero evidence that Obama ever called Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, or anyone else. More importantly, it wasn't even necessary. Presumably, Buttigieg dropped out for the exact reason he said he did. He had no plausible path to victory. Same with Klobuchar. Obama was largely not active during the primary. According to another New York Times article, party officials were more direct, prodding Mr. Obama to be more active behind the scenes, especially after Mr. Biden had begun his comeback by winning the South Carolina primary. But the former president, often communicating through Eric Schultz, a political aide who has also served as a bridge to the Biden campaign, insisted that his best use would be as a passive peacemaker. He kept his powder dry, and that gave him credibility, which made all the difference, said Tom Perez, the Democratic National Committee chairman, who served as labor secretary under Mr. Obama. The one candidate who Obama did speak to, and apparently did convince to drop out, at least according to the Times, was Bernie Sanders, who spoke with Obama 4 times towards the end of his campaign. All of these things could have happened on their own. An Obama intervention was largely superfluous. By the time Super Tuesday rolled around, the only establishment candidate who could beat Bernie was Biden, thanks to his support among older black voters. The establishment choice was obvious. Obama being added to the equation adds nothing of explanatory value. Maybe the New York Times is wrong and he did orchestrate everything that happened, but as of now, there's no evidence that's the case. Of course, Bernie eventually did drop out and endorse Biden. To say that our friends on the left have melted down over this is to say the least of it. Kyle Kulinski was completely unhinged during the primary, but he took it to a new level after the establishment consolidation.
Without that coup that happened right before Super Tuesday, it was like a coup. What happened? Somehow, in a political masterstroke at the last minute, you had Obama make the phone call to Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar, and they dropped out and endorsed Biden. Which, without that, Biden would not have won. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Without that move, Biden would not have won. Bernie would have won. He would have gotten at least a plurality.
That is beyond hyperbole. First of all, you actually need to be in charge to have a coup against you. Winning 2 out of the 3 initial contests doesn't cut it. Second, there's absolutely nothing illegitimate about endorsements. Kyle refers to the day Klobuchar and Buttigieg endorsed Biden as Bloody Monday.
What I'm now calling Bloody Monday was when the dynamic of this race completely shifted.
There's nothing bloody or violent about endorsements. Was it bloody when Ro Khanna endorsed Bernie? Or when TYT endorsed Bernie? Or when Bernie endorsed Biden? No, of course not. Furthermore, neither Klobuchar nor Buttigieg have magical mind control powers. Their supporters could have just as easily gone to Bernie if Bernie actually worked for them. Maybe if he spent more time courting their endorsements like Joe Biden did, rather than implying that anyone who disagrees with him is a corporate stooge, Bernie could have gotten their support. Furthermore, even if you think these endorsements are ill-gotten by Biden, that doesn't make Biden's victories illegitimate. An endorsement is nothing more than a glorified suggestion. It's basically a person saying, hey, I'm supporting this guy and I think you should too. What voters do after that is on them. If you don't like the decision they made, take it up with them. Don't condescend to them by acting like they were somehow tricked or manipulated into casting their ballot the way they did. Also, I should note that Klobuchar and Buttigieg were candidates that Kyle routinely dismissed as irrelevant and hated during the campaign.
In the case of Amy Klobuchar, I have no problem saying it. Super awkward, super loserish, but she also thinks she's the and it is beyond unbearable, which is why I sound right now like I can't bear it. There's a reason. Everybody was speculating, why is Mayor Pete at 0% with black voters? I don't know, maybe because he's terrible? Why is Mayor Pete doing really bad with younger voters? I don't know, maybe because they see through his nonsense, and when push comes to shove, they see he represents nothing, no change, the status quo.
But after they helped Biden win, they're apparently super influential. Funny how that works. And finally, if all it took was 2 endorsements to end your little revolution, then I guess it wasn't that popular to begin with, now was it? Now, as far as I'm concerned, this last part is the most important factor in the Bernie Sanders supporter meltdown. Yes, their candidate was defeated, but the far bigger loss was the ideological one. People like Kyle believe that progressive populism is the ideology that will really appeal to Americans when they find out what it is. Progressive policies are actually popular, and running on them will win elections. America just needs to hear the message. Bernie Sanders was the best test case for that, dealing a major blow to their claim of broad appeal. Of course, progressives always have an excuse for why they lose. They usually say that it's because they were outspent, or because the media ignored or was hostile towards them, or because the establishment backed the more moderate candidate, etc., etc. That really doesn't work for this primary cycle, though. They can't say that Bernie lost because of a money disadvantage. He spent way more money than Joe Biden. Sanders spent about $161 million, compared to Joe Biden's $74 million. The only candidate who spent more than Bernie was Mike Bloomberg, who, despite dropping $1 billion, only managed to win 55 delegates. Sanders had so much more campaign infrastructure, too. He had way more volunteers in offices than any other campaign. In fact, Kyle was gloating about how little campaign infrastructure Biden had just a few days before Super Tuesday.
Turns out, when Donald Trump nicknamed Joe Biden Sleepy Joe, he wasn't playing, dog. This is the sleepiest shit I've ever seen in my life. He's not even campaigning for president. Super Tuesday, that's where it's all at. That's where it's all at, man.
They also can't say that Bernie didn't have name recognition. He certainly lacked that in 2016, but this time around, people knew who he was. In fact, our friends on the left love to brag about how he is the most popular politician in America.
So, Morning Consult poll done January 10th, or this was released January 10th. Bernie Sanders was the most popular senator for the 11th time in a row.
He also had another advantage that he didn't have in 2016. He was going against a fractured field. People within the Sanders campaign explicitly said their strategy was to win pluralities within the fractured field until they got enough delegates.
I got to see the polling, and I knew that 10 days before Super Tuesday, we were literally ahead in every single state. Every single state. And you know who else knew that? Every other Democratic candidate and the Democratic establishment. That's why you saw, for the first time in American history, a consolidation like you've never seen before, and something that we could not control. If we'd attacked Joe Biden after Nevada, that would have really mattered if they'd have consolidated as early. We knew we needed 2 or 3 people in this race heading into Super Tuesday and beyond to make sure we could be the nominee.
If these people honestly thought that this was a good strategy, then they're idiots. If this was the only way Bernie could win, then Bernie was a bad candidate. Additionally, you can't even say that this plan was sabotaged by Bloody Monday. The field was still fractured on Super Tuesday. Elizabeth Warren was still running, which presumably took some support away from Sanders. But Mike Bloomberg was also still running.
And now with Bloomberg involved, carpet bombing the airways with ads, he's got more. Bloomberg has more of a presence in Super Tuesday states than Joe Biden does.
It's not crazy to assume that he took support away from Biden. The Sanders campaign literally could not have had better circumstances for this run. Their plan, which had largely worked up to that point, still could have been successful, but it wasn't. Things were teed up perfectly for them, and they whiffed. The fact of the matter is, after Bernie's victory in Nevada, we were all staring down the barrel of the Democratic Party nominating a self-identified socialist as their candidate. The people who spared us from that were the Democratic primary voters. And it wasn't some war of attrition like it was in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. This time around, Bernie got steamrolled. Remember the California primary? Bernie's one big victory on Super Tuesday? Well, more people in that state actually voted for Biden than Sanders on actual election day. Sanders only won the state because of mail-in voting from earlier. In other words, after Nevada, when the possibility of a Sanders nomination seemed likely, Democratic primary voters got their act together and prevented that from happening. Now, I will say that I've been pleasantly surprised that I've seen more contrition from our friends on the left than I would have expected. This includes Kyle. Many of them correctly point out that Bernie did a number of things wrong, but still, they can't help themselves. Most of them continue to blame external factors for the results. But for all of their excuses, and all of their crying about the media, and all of their howling about rigging, I believe that the real reason things happened the way they did is because the country is just not that into Bernie. Despite what progressives may have told you, Americans by and large like Bernie as a friend, but they don't love him. In politics, wish thinking often backfires. The idea that Bernie Sanders was America's dad was wish thinking.
This is why we call him America's dad.
And in politics, wish thinking often backfires. Tim Miller at The Bulwark notes that wish thinking is pretty common, and it can be very problematic. Miller was an establishment Republican during the 2016 GOP primary, and he was absolutely convinced that Trump would never be the nominee. In his article, Bernie Sanders dropped out because his campaign believed its own BS, Miller compares the wish thinking of establishment Republicans to that of the Bernie supporters. Miller writes that 4 years later, Bernie Sanders and his top supporters suffered from the same blindness. They had a BS narrative of their own. 1. There will be a massive turnout surge from disaffected Sanders voters. BS. 2. The Democratic Party's progressive Twitter wing had upended the establishment over the past 4 years. BS. Kind of crazy BS at that. 3. Look at those crowd sizes. 4. Younger Latino and black voters will go big for Bernie and either offset or convince their parents. LOL. And 5. Biden is sundowning and doesn't have any supports. This is BS built on other BS, meaning Twitter and crowd sizes. It was this narrative that drove many of the decisions the Sanders campaign made, and it blinded them to the possibility of other outcomes. Kyle himself often invoked Bernie's Twitter mob and crowd sizes as a sign that he had real support. Of course, those things are not the same as votes. So, there you have it. I wanted to make this video before we got too far out because I know that this narrative of the Democratic establishment robbing Bernie of his rightful nomination will get more exaggerated over time. I believe this is exactly what's happened with our collective memory of the 2016 Democratic primary. But that's another video for another day. I submit to you that Bernie lost because he and his progressive revolution have never been as popular as the left thinks. Turnout was lower than expected, especially in the demographics that Bernie was supposed to do well with. Now, I was specifically told that the American people, especially young people, would turn out for left-wing policy.
You appeal to young people with policy. I don't know if you've seen the polls, Joe, but young people, it's like 70 or 80%, depending on what line you use, supported Bernie Sanders. They supported Bernie Sanders because of Medicare for all, free college, living wage, ending the wars, Green New Deal. They supported Bernie for substantive reasons. The way you attract these people is substance.
Weirdly, he said this after Bernie lost the primary, after young people failed to show up for the candidate who was campaigning on all of those things. I'd love to ask Kyle why he maintains that position, after it seems to have been proven wrong. Sadly, I'll probably never get to do that, so I'll have to go for the next best option. To all of you Kulinski fanboys who have made your way to this video, after you're done typing your comments about what an irrelevant loser I am, please tell me why it is that if so many people were so enthusiastic for Bernie, why didn't they bother to show up when he actually needed them? Did a couple of endorsements really keep them from coming out for their guy? Or is it possible that maybe, just maybe, you've overestimated Bernie's popularity?